Streaming. Please work.
How long have you been online today, Robert?
A lot.
Yeah.
I've had at least 4 meetings online since 9 o'clock in the morning.
Oh,
God, yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
live online, like not just kind of tapping
Yeah.
away on at the computer.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Are we good to go? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. How long have you been online today, Robert?
Oh.
Oh, that's me.
Yeah, don't worry, I've got rid of it. Okay, so I think we are pretty much online. So, is that working? Let's see. Good, we are. Hello everyone, welcome. Let's have a look, got people coming in. We'll just let people gradually come in and then I'll kind of start with some introductions and so on. 284, 287, 291. It's great. It's good seeing the numbers of participants going up. Can you see that as well, Robert and Kerry?
Not at the. Oh yeah. Yes.
300. Oh my God! I better not look at that.
Okay, I'm going to start. So welcome everyone. Welcome to the third in our series of webinars to help you with your online teaching. And we're very pleased this evening to be joined by Kerry Jones and Robert Martinez. Robert's going to talk first and Kerry is going to talk second. Neither of you have looked at me in a weird way, so I'm assuming that I've got that correct. I'm just going to do a little bit of housekeeping just to let you know we are going to be recording this. So let me just start that now. I only ever say this to remind myself to do it. Okay, you might have a little screen up there that says that you accept that it's being recorded, even though none of your names or cameras or anything like that will be recorded. So that's good. We're recording it. I'll put some links up at the end of the webinar, which will have the URLs or the links to where you can find the recording, to where you can find the certificate, where you can find the survey, all of those things. I will be repeating that throughout the webinar and putting that into the chat so you're aware. Also, we've got the Q&A at the bottom. We've got the chat and the Q&A. So please use the chat to chat and say hello and where you're from. I can see there's already lots of people saying they're from Turkey, Germany, Poland, Ukraine, Bulgaria, Bangladesh. Gosh, it's late in Bangladesh. It's going too quickly now for me, so I can't see Algeria, Pakistan, Madrid, Egypt, Greece. Right, wonderful. Lots of places all over the world. So there's the chat for the chat, and then there's a Q&A. So please use the chat for chat and the Q&A to put your questions in. You can also see other people's questions. If it's a question that you have as well, then do like the question. That'll kind of move it up nearer to the top. So just to give you an idea of the format, Robert is going to talk first. God, why did I say Martin? Robert's going to talk first for about half an hour or so. Then Kerry's going to give her presentation, and then we'll have time for Q&A after that. So while you're enjoy the talks and put your questions, if you've got any questions, into the Q&A. What else? Certificates. I've said certificates. Well, there will be lots of links to the certificates. So please don't worry about that. Or put anything in the chat. How do I get a certificate? Because we will be telling you. And we're recording this, as I said. Okay, I'm going to introduce Robert, who's going to be our first presenter. So Robert has worked in the field of English language teaching and teacher training in Colombia, Italy, the UK, Canada, Singapore, Egypt, Spain, Bulgaria, Vietnam, and Romania, lots of places since 1994. And he speaks Italian, Spanish, French, and Portuguese. And correct me if I'm wrong, I think this is up to date, is director at La Cunza International House, Beasain. Yeah. Okay. During his career, he's trained teachers in many countries, assessed and moderated Cambridge Teaching Awards and exams all over the world, presented for Cambridge in Italy, designed blended courses for Moodle, and he holds a Delta, Consultants eTrinity validated Cert ICT distinction, and a post-grad diploma in TESOL and MA in TESOL, an MA Digital Technologies for Language Teaching, double distinction, and a postgraduate diploma in academic management. Wow. Okay. He's also the lead tutor on the Consultants Cert ICT course, Cert IBET course. He's also a tutor, I think, on the Teaching Live Online course currently, and IH London certificate in YL Centre Management. Lots of things. So he's obviously very busy, so we're all very lucky to have him and Kerry here to present for us today. So Robert, I shall hand over to you.
Thank you. Let me share my screen. Can you enable me, please? Oh, okay. Great.
Okay.
Yes, thanks. Okay. So, hello, everybody. Thank you very much for being here. And I'm really excited for this wonderful opportunity to be here. As you know, my name is Robert Martinez, and I'm also an online tutor with the TCE. This short chat presentation is going to be about tech tools for online teaching. And I would like to start the same way I start all the training sessions that I do, or even my lessons. I'm also currently teaching primary and secondary school students. I would like to start by sharing my learning outcomes because as a teacher myself, it gives me a sense of confidence if I know exactly where I'm going. So by the end of this session, this short presentation, you will have thought about what teaching is about. I know that we are all practicing teachers and we have different years, lots of experience, and we are at different levels in our careers. You will have also thought about the role technology plays in online teaching, and I think that this is really, really important, especially in the current circumstances where we are now having to teach online as the only option right now. And you will also have seen my top 3 tools for online teaching. So if you think about 2 or 3 weeks ago, or in some places up to a month ago or more, we were in our classrooms happily teaching our lessons with our students, in the classroom, enjoying our rapport, building rapport, making the students the center of our lessons. Then COVID-19 came along and we were basically catapulted into teaching live online in most cases. So we're right now, some people may be into their 3rd week. We are currently into our 3rd week of teaching live online. And some people may have been teaching already for over a month. Some people may have started this week. And I think that we all are thinking at the moment is like, what are the skills that I need to teach live online? What tools can I use to make my lessons as engaging as they were before? And all these questions are valid. Are definitely valid. However, I would like everybody to remember that teaching is about people, whether it is face-to-face or whether it is online. And so we need to build the same rapport we were building face-to-face. We need to continue to plan our lessons the way we're planning them for face-to-face delivery. We need to keep thinking about how we're going to engage those students that are shy, those students that are not shy, that they're talkative, to ensure that there's a balance in the classroom. And so in that sense, I think it's useful to think, okay, I was in a classroom face-to-face teaching 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, a month ago. Now I'm online. I need to reach my students on the other side of the screen. And is going to be exactly the same. There are some skills that we do need, some extra skills that we do need. However, the principles, the basic principles are the same. Now, when teaching online, we have two possibilities, whether we teach synchronously, and that means that our lessons before were taken into, which were face-to-face, are now being delivered online at the same time, on the same days and at the same times you were delivering them before. This is my case. All the lessons we had at school are basically now being delivered online. Or it could be asynchronously done. That means that you're not teaching at the same time. So I know of some contexts where you have to provide the input before the live lesson. Students go through it and then you meet them once or twice a week to go through the material. So regardless of what the context is, I just want to say that and remind everybody that the same basic principles for face-to-face teaching apply to online learning, and that you shouldn't worry too much if you're not feeling very comfortable with technology, or if you think that you need to know a lot about technology, because just as with learning anything, it is going to be a process, and that process is going to take you as a teacher slash learner just in that journey. Now, the decisions we make is what's going to make the difference. And that is because I believe that everything that we were doing before, we can and should be doing online. And that is pedagogy should be driving our decisions. We should be making informed decisions in regards to technology, and not all the way around. Why am I saying this? Because I've seen many cases where we are, because we're online and we have now access to all the different tools and websites, and then we feel the need to actually bring them into our classroom. And I think that that's not really very useful. We should make sure that whatever we use in the classroom, then that we are still planning the lessons so that the students are at the center of our attention and not just us. If you're lucky enough, I know that in some contexts, for example, in my context, we have access to all the digital books and all that we're using. We have access to those digital materials. So it's very easy to put them all online, all on the screen, and then just go through them. The quality obviously is going to be higher because you can see the screen, the students can see the screen, they can hear very well. However, it's very important to understand that just going through every single exercise that we have in a book, I mean, you don't need training, you don't need a teacher for that. Anyone can do that, just go through exercises as they come. So my bottom line here before we move on is keep doing the same you were doing before. Continue to plan your lessons, and then whatever tool you want to explore, make sure that it is supporting your lesson rather than replacing your lesson. With this in mind, I would like to share my top 3 tools. And it's only 3. You may be a little bit disappointed at this stage because you may be thinking, oh, but it was tech tools for online teaching. I would like to say that I want to share just 3 right now because right now you may be feeling a little bit overwhelmed. Why? Because you went from teaching online face-to-face to teaching online all of a sudden, all your classes, you're trying to come to grips with technology, you're trying to come to grips with managing your students online, learning about the environment and the tool that you're using, whether it is Zoom or whether it is Adobe Connect or Microsoft Teams or Google Hangouts. So I want to share only 3 because I think this is an important time, at least this transitioning period where we're getting to grips with everything. Maybe in 2-3 weeks, we're going to be like, okay, well, now I'm comfortable with it. I know what I'm doing. But right now, I think it's very important to remember that less is more. This is something that Anne, my colleague from TCE, also mentioned in her webinar last week. And she mentioned the cut and expand, cut and expand. So I would like everybody to just think less is more. And especially now that we as teachers are under pressure because we have to put on a new face, a new show on, get to grips with technology, with a new learning environment, it is important to keep it simple. Now, two of those three tools that I would like to share with you are Google Docs and Google Slides. And you may be thinking, oh, but I know about them. Just bear with me for a while. I want to share, and I have chosen Google Docs and Google Slides because they are accessible to anyone. Anyone who's got a Gmail account has access to the G Suite. You don't have to register, you don't have to pay for them, nor now, nor later. And this is something that I was thinking when I was preparing this presentation, because it's true that there has been a very positive response by lots of organizations in ELT and all over the world. They're giving us access to, free access to their products, to their premium products for a period of, I don't know, 3 months or in this critical period. And that is fantastic. And, you know, I couldn't think of being more thankful for that. However, I was thinking, okay, but as a teacher myself, if I have to use and want to use tools in the classroom, and I want to have access to all the different features, what am I going to do after everything goes back to normal? Am I going to have to pay for a subscription? I'm not saying that we shouldn't pay for a subscription for a tool that is useful. I'm saying I want to try and give ideas of and examples of how I use these tools, because they are accessible to anyone and you can start using them tomorrow or this evening. Now, with that preamble, I would like to say that I like Google Docs and Google Slides because I can use them synchronously or asynchronously. So I can use them in class or outside class or before class or after a lesson. These tools have allow for different levels of interaction. You may remember Anne's webinar, if you watched it, that she mentioned at least 6 different levels of interaction. And this is super important because now that we're teaching online, there may be a tendency of just lecturing and just, if you think that personally you were a little bit teacher-centered before and you were dominating your lessons a little bit before, then this may be happening now and being accentuated and exaggerated even more now that you have to be in front of a computer, and you may feel that you have to fill in all the gaps in between what you say, what the students are saying. So these tools allow for different levels of interaction. It could be me presenting it to the students and using it to make them comfortable with the tool first. It could be then, when they're comfortable with the tools, working between them. It could be in pairs. It could be between different groups where I also have access to. So there are different levels of interaction that are allowed. And the last level of interaction being between them and the tool, where they're the ones that are creating information. So, I would like to underline the fact that I mentioned that interaction between the students and the technology last, just as Anne did in her seminar. They're excellent for writing skills development, and not only. It's just that those of you who are familiar with them will agree with me in that the first input may be in writing whatever it is that you give them a task to provide an answer for, or to engage in a discussion. So writing has a very important role in the use of these tools, but is not just about writing. Also, they are excellent tools to foster collaboration and communication outside the classroom, in the classroom, during the lesson, before or after the lesson. They all are also easily used to encourage creativity and critical thinking when we set up clear tasks and small projects. If you notice, those 4 C's are the very much talked about 4 C's of education: collaboration, communication, creativity, and critical thinking. So before we move on, and then we look at examples of how I use them and ideas for how to use them that you may be able to take back into your classroom or that you have done already, I would like to ask the audience a question. And I would like you to go to your chat box and tell me, using only one adjective, how are you feeling about this session today? Just one adjective. Think about the adjective that would encapsulate your feelings about this session today. Great, okay. Wonderful, lots of very positive adjectives, I'm happy. Good, thank you. Moving on, I would like to now share with you two different strands. I've divided the presentation into these tools and how we can use them for teaching and learning, but also how we can use them for our own professional development. In this case, this is an example of a very simple, very basic, and I'm saying very simple and very, very basic because it's important that if we are now new to live on teaching live online, it's always better to start with small steps. And this is probably at the bottom of the pile, the simplest of ways, setting up a writing task with your students where the interaction is teacher-student initially. This is an example of a CPE task for essay writing task that I was teaching that course last year. And so the initial task was to get students to set the task in class and then for them to write them up in a shared document. So that was the first step. You can see that I have covered personal information, so that obviously for privacy reasons, but the idea is that that initial step of interaction was between me and the students, in each individual student, when they felt comfortable with the website, with how to add text, how to do different things like text editing, and not everybody is able to do this or is comfortable with this, then after 1 or 2 months, then we moved on to the next stage of interaction, which was, okay, now we're gonna work in pairs or groups of 3 collaboratively in the answering, trying to answer and approach those tasks. So it was writing, but the amount of collaboration they had to do meant that they were engaging between them and engaging in discussion and negotiating meaning. So something as simple as this, obviously this is for a CPE group, and you may be thinking, yes, but they are already proficient in the language and they can use language very well. You can do exactly the same thing with students as young as, I would say, in my experience, that I have used 12, 13, and a level that I used this kind of work was 2 weeks ago, three weeks ago, with a pre-intermediate group of 10, 11/12-year-olds. So it's exactly the same process, just introducing it gradually. When they're comfortable with how to work in it, then you can move on. Now, this is just an example of teaching and learning. In the next slide, then for our CPD, this is a Google Doc that I created and added a list of 18 different Google Slides presentations, the links to those slides that we're going to share with you after the seminar. Paul is going to share a PDF of the slides, and the links will be active. So this is a document that basically contains 18 links to 18 different language presentations that in the last 6 months, my teachers here, Paul mentioned I'm a director of studies, but I also teach, and the teachers here were saying, oh, I would like some ideas on how to present, for example, the present simple and adverse of frequency, or comparatives and superlatives, or conditionals, or more advanced grammar. So I put them together and I shared them with them, and I'm sharing them with you tonight. You can then, when you have them, you can download them, you can save a copy for yourself, you can edit them, and then use them in whichever way you want. I will continue to add to this document. So is a way of sharing our love in these difficult times, sharing our expertise, sharing our resources in a way that is simple, is easy, and basically a way of supporting one another. You don't have to pay for this. You don't have to pay to register to get Google Docs. So this is an example for our CPD, or continuous professional development. You can do exactly the same thing between with your other peers, share ideas, join another teacher in your school, in your area, and share ideas and materials and resources, especially if you are sharing the same, you're teaching the same levels. There's a link to my YouTube channel there. I'm especially involved in teacher training. And so I have created lots of very short, 5 maximum 10, 15-minute videos, rehearsing and putting together ideas for teacher training and methodology. Now, just to wrap up on Google Docs, I believe the key to whatever we do and how we use Google Docs or Google Slides or whatever task or whatever tool you want to bring into the classroom lies in your task design. First of all, we have to have a clear outcome, regardless of how much experience you have. I've been teaching for 25 years and I still write my learning outcomes, and you will see the example, because that allows me to see where I'm going in my lesson, in my session, whether it is a lesson or a seminar. I always ask 5 questions when I'm planning a lesson or a seminar or a webinar or a workshop. Who, what, where, when, and how long are at the heart of that lesson. We're going to look at an example. And I prepared this example here because I was thinking, okay, how can we make it, how can I convey that idea clearly? Now, this is a task that I prepared for a group of pre-intermediate 12-year-olds on the revision of modals of obligation, necessity, and the like. And my learning outcome for the task was, by the end of this task, you will have spoken/written about your favorite sport and its rules. Now, bear in mind that this is for me. This is my pre-planning, my pre-preparation, just to make sure that I have a clear structure of my lesson and what I want to do. Who's going to work? Who's going to be involved in the task? Are they going to work in pairs? In this case, I wanted my live online lesson to have a special focus on speaking. So in pairs, tell your partner about your favorite sport. I wanted them to speak in pairs first before they would do any writing. Think about the rules of your favorite sport. Speak in class, where? So are they going to speak in class? Are they going to write in class, or are they going to do some research outside class? When are they going to speak? Are they going to speak at the revision stage of models lesson, or are they going to write at a controlled practice stage of the lesson and then offline? How long am I going to give them for that speaking stage of the lesson and then preparation for the writing? So the piece of advice that I would give anyone, regardless of the tools, is when you plan your lesson first, have a clear understanding of where you're going, then bring in your tool, then see how that tool is supporting your language aims for that lesson. I would also say suggest that your learning outcomes are SMART, and I'm sure that you are familiar with them. Look at your chat box and please type very quickly what you think those stand for. I think it's pretty popular and we pretty much know what they stand for, but it would be a nice way of just checking with you and giving you a chance to interact with me. Absolutely, yes. Very good. Yep. Yeah, specific. Everybody said specific, wonderful, measurable, achievable, good. Are, okay, relevant, okay, also possible. Time-bound, excellent, excellent. So the idea is, yes, as you said, realistic. In my version, it's realistic, but relevant is also absolutely fine. Now, we're going to look at how those learning outcomes for the task that we just saw are SMART. And this is something I do when I'm looking at my lesson as a whole. You may be saying, yes, but I don't have time to do this every lesson. And you may be true. You may be right in this sense. However, I would say, remember that if you force yourself to do something like this, it's a technique because you're forcing yourself to it. But remember that techniques that become unconscious, and then you're automatically going through that when you're planning your lessons, are not a technique anymore. They become a skill. So you can develop this skill. A technique is conscious. I'm consciously making an effort to, okay, the first few lessons, I want my lessons to be, I'm going to use this tool and I want to make sure that my learning outcomes are SMART. The more you do it, you start doing it unconsciously, then you will have acquired that skill. It's a specific, my task is specific because I know that I want them to either speak or write about sports and rules, not about anything else. So in my own lesson, I can use this as a map. When at every stage I'm checking, how is the tool helping me in that speaking or writing about sports and rules? Measurable, I know who, I know when, I know where, I know how long in that process, so I can identify the different parts of that task. It is achievable because it comes in at the right stage in the process. Now, sometimes we ask students to do something and then we realize, oh, I should have set that up earlier. So I should have showed them how to use the tool before I actually asked them to go and write a paragraph in it. So it's coming at the right stage because in that learning task, the idea was that they came as a revision stage. It is realistic because I want them to speak or write about their favorite sports and rules, something that is relevant, realistic, as someone said before in the chat box. And it is time bound because it can be, the speaking part is synchronous, and I know exactly how long I want them to speak for. And the writing part is going to be asynchronous because I know exactly how much I want to give them to complete that task. Now, moving on to Google Slides. Now, these are 6 slides, just a screenshot of the first 6 slides of one of those slides presentations that I'm sharing with you on 18 different grammar topics, language topics. This is, for example, on the present simple passive, and they have pretty much the same structure. So the task, whenever creating these slides, that was what I had in mind. I want a clear task and outcome. This is for teaching and learning because you can use it either before the lesson, get the students to go through it at their own time and then approach it in the lesson, or you can use it for revision, or you can use it to actually deliver the lesson. So you can use it in whichever way you want. This is another example of a different topic, like for example, the present simple, that you can also use at any time. By no means they are perfect. So clearly you may find things that you may be thinking, oh, I can do it differently, I can use it differently. Now, Google Slides, I like it because initially I like to use them in teacher-student interaction, but it's not just for them to watch or look at, because you will see that at the end, most of them, if not all of them, I ask the students I give them access to the slides, and I ask them to add their own examples. And this is something that they have found, that they have enjoyed adding them. And I ask them to add their examples. I ask them to use color in the same way to show me that they understand what the different parts are. So we're taking that. They first see it and how it works, and then we ask them to add something to it for teaching and learning. Now, Google Slides for our own CPD. This is an example of a Google slide that I customized. You can see that the shape is different. It's like an A4. And in the end, you can download it and create a little booklet that you can share with your students. This is from the course that I just finished moderating, the e-moderation course with the Consultants E, where the candidates, the participants, added their own tasks. They designed their own tasks. So I put them together, created this Google Slides, and then turned it into a PDF for them to take away. So this is something that can be a mini project with your students as well, with your own peers. You can customize the slides so that they look like a page. You just go to the settings and then change the size of the page so that it looks not like a slide, but as a PDF. And so this is just a quick idea for you as well. Here again, 6 slides of another presentation that I made to work with some of my teachers here in a mini conference that we had. Now, I'm conscious of the time is ticking, so I'm just going to move on. The last, I said three tools that I wanted to share with you. So Google Slides, Google Docs, and Google Forms. And this is my favorite one because as a teacher myself, having different classes and different students, I find Google Forms very useful because, especially in terms of marking, because I can use quizzes, I can tailor, make them and turn them into quizzes which are self-grading, and that saves me time. I can generate reports on students' work, I can get results, and I can recycle them. And I can bring them in, a quiz that I gave at the beginning of a unit a month ago or 3 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago or 2 lessons ago. I can bring it up again maybe right before the official exam just to get them to recycle, to revisit the same concepts in a different way. This for teaching and learning. Now, if you want to do that, you may be aware of this, but if not, if you have a Google account and you go onto your Google Drive and you go into Google Forms, all you need to do is click on that little arrow there. So that is the settings. Then make sure that you check quizzes, turn on the form. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to collect that information or make it self-grading and award points and give points for different questions. I personally like the fact that I always turn on release grade immediately after submission so that they can see how much they got and what they did. And also they can see missed questions, correct answers, and point values. So in that sense, for example, after that you save, this is what it would look like. An example of what a quiz would look like. This is a 2-question example of a Google Form quiz that I created for students and for teachers, and all they need to, and all I wanted to do was basically collect information in regards to those 2 questions. The link is active, so if you want to participate, not right now, but when you get the PDFs, then is there. And this would be an example of CPD, how you can use it with your own teachers, with peers, to recycle. I've taken the quiz myself several times, especially if I have to prepare for a workshop or something, just to help myself go through it. And this is basically an example. You have different questions, multiple choice. You would still have to mark yourself open-ended questions. So that's the only thing. If they're discrete item questions, yes, no, true, false, 1 answer or 2 words, that are predictable, you can make sure that you can set that up in the settings, and that would be self-marked. Now, just coming to the end of my presentation, I would like to just leave with you, give you a couple of tips, basically. And that is, don't use technology that you don't have a basic understanding of. And this is especially so for those of us who right now may be feeling, I need to cope with my lessons, I need to teach my lessons, and on top of that, I need to learn how to use the platform, and let alone any technology that I want to use into a lesson. So if you feel that you don't have a basic understanding of it, leave it aside for a minute, explore it in your free time, try and come to grips with it, explore it, and then move on. Use technology as you would planning any lesson. Those 5 questions that we looked before. And above all, ask yourself and think about what the students get out of the lesson when you bring technology in. How is that Google Doc? How is that Kahoot? How is that Quizlet? How is that Google Slide benefiting them? So some food for thought to finish up. Some questions. What are my learning outcomes for this lesson? How is this tool enhancing my lesson and supporting my students, my learning outcomes? How much have my students done outside the lesson in preparation for it? How much are they going to do individually, in pairs, groups, interaction? How can I put them at the center of the activity? And only at the end, who will be using the tool? When? Why? Can they use that tool? How is that helping their learning and their collaboration? Okay, so that's the end of my presentation. And this last slide is basically the link to the course Teaching Live Online, which is coming, started again on the 20th of April. And I will be working along with Carol Rainbow on the course. Thank you very much.
Thanks ever so much, Robert. That's fantastic. Very, very interesting, and lots of really useful advice, I think, there for a lot of people. Certainly from the chat, that seems to be the case. And yeah, also a few questions in there about tools and Google Forms, etc., etc. So we can come back to those a bit later. But thank you ever so much for that. Okay, we're going to move on to Kerry Jones, who has an equally impressive resume. She's a teacher, a trainer, and materials writer. She's based in the south of Spain. She's been working in the world of ELT since 1986, teaching in Spain, Italy, Hungary, and the UK. And she started writing teaching materials in 1994. I'm sure many of you have used her course books if you're teaching teenagers and young adults. She's written lots and lots of them, and she's also been involved in tutoring and online teacher training courses since 2010. She's tutored on a number of inset training courses with teachers from Latin America, mainly focusing on CLIL and literacy, and has tutored on the online Trinity TESOL diploma for 5 years with a special focus on using technology in the classroom. She's been tutoring on the consultancy blended courses since 2016. If you are also on Facebook, there's a group called ELT Footprint, which she started with another group of people in Spain. I definitely recommend having a look at that. There's lots and lots of useful ideas and information there, so please do go and have a look. That's ELT Footprint on the Facebook, on Facebook. Anyway, Kerry, over to you.
Thank you, Paul. And thanks, Robert. That was really interesting. Okay, so I should be able to share my screen now. Just a second. Okay. Everyone should be able to see my screen now, I think. Yeah. Could you just type yes in the chat box, and that will make me feel more confident.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's lovely. Okay, so very quickly then, just a second, I need to see the chat box as well. So I'm just going to open my chat box over here. Basically, we're going to be looking more at our role, what part we play in the new teaching online environment that we're most of us, I'm guessing, have been kind of thrown into recently without actually thinking that that was going to be our role. So we're going to be talking more about us and less about specific tools, but please, if you have any questions on specific tools as we go through, then add them to the question and answer or in the chat, and we'll try and come to those at the end. Okay, so we're going to look at two things: the tutor's role and teacher presence. And we're going to look very quickly at these 3 areas. We're going to have a look at how these roles might change between a face-to-face classroom and in a virtual classroom. We're going to look again, as Robert did, at the difference between synchronous and asynchronous context. So we'll look at that in a little bit more detail. And we're going to look also at the importance of communication and of our teacher voice. And in more than one way, we'll be looking at voice. Okay, so we have been here sitting together now for about 40 minutes. And so rather than me talking at you straight away, I'm going to ask you to talk to me in the chat box and finish this very short sentence with adjectives, whatever adjectives come to mind. Could you type those adjectives in the chat box, please?
Kerry, is it?
Okay.
No, yeah.
I'm here, yeah. And I've got my chat working at last. Okay, hero, wonderful. I think that's fantastic. Juggler, motivator, yes. Inspiring, competent. Okay, there's loads more coming. Patient, coach, actor, helper, guide. This is fantastic. This is you. This is what you are. This is, I have to say, really, I feel it's kind of such a privilege and a pleasure to be talking to so many teachers today here in this room. And each and every one of you is doing such an important job. It's I don't know, you're going into people's homes. If you're teaching young learners, you're helping the parents out, you're creating a routine for people who really are coping with something which is just unprecedented for them. It is for us as well. And as teachers, teachers are really important anyway, but I would say that at the moment, you know, you are all the more important. So, fantastic. We're getting more and more. And oh, yes, exhausted. Someone has written exhausted there as an adjective. And I think we have to accept that there is a negative side to this as well. There's exhaustion. We're overwhelmed, possibly we're overworking ourselves. And so this is some of the things that we're going to be looking at and talking about in the next couple of minutes. But let's have a look quickly at a word cloud, which I have made to show my appreciation of teachers. And the clapping, which was going on at the very beginning of this webinar, here in Spain, we clap at 8 p.m. to thank all the key workers. And I'd like to say that for me, teachers are included in that applause. And so here is some more appreciation of you. And can you see any of the adjectives that you were typing into the box? Yeah, there are definitely a load of very positive adjectives there. Okay, but I think apart from all of this, we also have to remember that teachers are human. Okay, and to be human means that we're not just an online teaching machine. And it might feel to some that that's what we're being treated as, that we're expected to be able to just quickly flick into online teaching. No, we're human too. And I think this is for me, a really important message that I'd like to put across to all you teachers who are working so hard online. Look after yourself, okay? This is the first rule of teaching in a new context, teaching under new circumstances. If possible, don't overwork, okay? Keep, as Robert was saying, as Anne has said, keep it simple. Believe in yourself. You know how to teach. You're a teacher. You know what you're doing. You know how to do it. So try as much as possible not to get too stressed out. And you know, this is a cliche, but you know what the flight attendants say with the oxygen masks. Look after yourself first, and then the people around you. And that's really, really important for you to remember now. So you need to remember that you have to be okay so you can help your students to be okay. So really, really stress this. We're all human. We all need to forgive ourselves if sometimes we make mistakes, to be fair on ourselves and our students, to maybe sometimes lower our expectations a little bit. This is a huge new experience for all of us. So really, we just want to look after ourselves. Okay, so having said that, the teacher is human, let's move on now to focus a little bit more on the topic for today. One word of warning. Though all of the tools that Robert was showing are simple to use, they're wonderfully effective, they're really supportive of the teacher. But we also have to really be careful with the danger of digital overwhelm for everybody, okay? So that's all of us now in every aspect of our life. We're needing to mediate it through our computers, through our phones, through our devices, and this becomes quite exhausting. So just be aware of this. And also, this message from the World Health Organization. So, wow. Do you do this for yourself? Do you give yourself a 3-minute break every 30 minutes? So what I'm going to ask you to do now, I can't see if you're doing it or not, but you'll see that I'm going to do it. We have been sitting, or I have anyway, I don't know about you, for more than 30 minutes. So this is something that I think we have to ask all our students to do. I'm going to ask you, first of all, to just stretch. Move. If you want, stand up. I'm not going to go very far, but I would suggest that maybe go for a little walk. In any online live lesson, it's nice sometimes to break things up and to remember that we're all people, we're all human, and it's really great sometimes to just get up and move. I'd like to share a couple of links with you here. First of all, to a blog post by Lindsay Clanfield, who was the first speaker on the first of this series of webinars, where he shares some ideas for how you can get your students up and moving during the live lessons online, and how you can get them working away from the computer when they're not in the lesson, and doing things around the house that doesn't include screens. The second link is to a Padlet resource by a teacher from Robert's school, IH Lacunza, where there are suggestions, again, for how to break up the lesson in a physical way. So ideas for getting students up and moving, even though we're all sitting at the computer, we don't always have to be static. Okay, so that's just one little tip. Let's move on. Okay, so Robert was talking about this as well. So let's just revisit the idea of our role as a teacher in the face-to-face classroom. That's what most of us are used to. That's the context that we expected to be teaching in. So let's just remember what it is that we do. What is our role in the face-to-face classroom, just day to day, lesson to lesson? What are the basic things that we do in the classroom? Can you write your answers in the chat, please? Okay, and I'm having problems accessing my chat box again. Okay, great, I've got it. So, motivate, guide, present a topic. Any other ideas? What is our role in the face-to-face classroom? I have some new messages popping up. Yeah. Listen, coordinate, moderate. Okay, it's wonderful. I love the way that everything that we do is based on verbs. Let's see if these verbs were ones that you'd thought of. So we have creating rapport We do this in our face-to-face classrooms. It's very important, building class dynamics between our students as well as us with our students. Motivating, this was definitely one of the ones in the chat box. We motivate our students. Managing classroom tasks, getting people into groups, into pairs, giving instructions, monitoring and supporting, giving feedback, as you said in the chat, presenting, guiding, explaining. Okay, so these are the things that we're very used to doing. They're second nature. These are the things that we do in our face-to-face classrooms. Is it any different in a virtual classroom? Is our role that different? I would argue no, just as Robert said earlier. Teaching is teaching. The principles of teaching are the same. It's just that now we need to be a little bit more creative, maybe, in the way that we do these things. We have to learn new strategies. We have to think about, or we maybe just remember the basic things that we do as face-to-face teachers, and then we can now do it in a virtual classroom. Okay, so we're going to look a little bit closer at all of these, but in a virtual classroom, we're creating rapport as well. If we're still working with classes that we were working with face-to-face, then this isn't such a big problem because the rapport is already there. But what we need to do is we need to maintain it. There's all kinds of things we can do. We nominate. We talk to students individually. We remember them. We throw in remarks that just in the same way as we would do in our face-to-face classrooms. Motivating. Motivation is, I think, is really a key here. How do we make sure that our students feel confident that they can do what we're asking them to do? How can we make sure that they're aware of our appreciation of the work they're doing? Is the praise getting through to them? Is the encouragement getting through to them? Managing classroom tasks, again, it's that question of how are we going to do it? Where can we do this? Are we going to do it all together as a group? Are we going to do it in a Google Doc? So it's not a question of changing the tasks at all, but it's slightly changing the space where those tasks are taking place. Monitoring and supporting and giving feedback, all of these things can be done in the virtual classroom or around the virtual classroom. And so we move on to looking at the ways in which we maybe as teachers are even more important now that we're teaching online than when we were teaching face to face, that our presence, that our students feel that we're there for them is even more important, which can feel a little bit like an extra weight of responsibility. But I think that really we have to remember that these two things are the big challenges that we're facing, much more than the technology, I think. The challenges are that everybody is new to learning in this environment and everybody's feeling a little bit lost. So probably the very best advice that Robert gave as well was take small steps. When you're using tools which are new to students, be really, really sympathetic to the struggles, to the frustrations. We all know, we all have problems when the technology breaks down, when things don't work. That's fine. That's fine. It's just something that we can work with. The teachers have problems, the students have problems. And generally speaking, in an online environment, I think everyone is actually more forgiving. We all know that things can go wrong and we don't get angry or upset with each other about it. Not even, there is frustration, but the frustration is with the technology and not with the people. The students will not feel frustrated with you as a teacher if they're struggling with the technology. And if we take the technology little step by little step, then hopefully we can all work together towards feeling confident. The other thing is that being online is not as easy or as immediate as being in a classroom together. There may be obstacles, things that feel awkward. If you're working with younger learners, maybe teens, they're incredibly used to being online, but not with their teacher. And so sometimes there's a little bit of silliness, awkwardness, or inappropriacy. And these are all things that we need to just iron out and work with. And above all, we just need to be patient with the students, patient with ourselves, patient with the technology. Okay. So moving on to something that Robert was looking at as well, was the difference between synchronous and asynchronous teaching and learning and tasks. So synchronous is when we're together at the same time. It's real time. So this is like the face-to-face classroom, and we are working with the students all together, probably in a live classroom together. And asynchronous is anything that we're doing outside of that, where people can work at their own pace, at their own time. If anything, I think with online teaching, if we give more space for asynchronous tasks, we're actually helping students to work at their own speed, at their own pace. So very often, if you're working through the same course book that you were working with face-to-face, you might want to give students time to read their reading text at home before the lesson. You may want to set it up in one class, they read it, and then come back to discuss it in the next class. Or you might want them to discuss it in an asynchronous discussion forum, or in some kind of instant messaging forum. You can play around a little bit more with the communication channels that you use. So asynchronous can be it can actually help us. It can actually be a benefit and an added value to the fact that now we're all working together in an online context. So let's have a quick look at the differences between synchronous and asynchronous. Okay, so in a synchronous lesson, our tools are the camera, the mic, the chat box, also the screen where we can share our PDFs, our Google Slides, maybe depending on your bandwidth, the video or audio. Asynchronously, we can use email, we can use text messages, we can use instant messaging, we can use Google, we can use any number of text-based communication. In synchronous, one of the most important things, of course, is the smile. So when you're working in front of a camera, it's, you know, just kind of imagine that you really are talking to someone there that you can see. If you can see the faces of your students, it's so much easier. But smiling is really important. Eye contact is important. Look for the camera if you can. I always feel slightly uncomfortable because the screen is reflecting in my glasses, but my students get used to that pretty quickly. So smiling, eye contact, voice. I think that's one of the things that maybe we need to think about our teacher voice when we're online is we may need to be a little more careful, a little more graded, speak a little more slowly, just to be clear, because the body language, the facial expressions are there, but the rest of the body language maybe isn't. So these are things that we really, really highlight, that we use as our presence, our teacher presence online. Asynchronously, we're using language. If we're using text, the words we choose are really important. Depending on who you're working with, you might want to use emojis or emoticons to make your text more personal, to add the emotions that aren't there because they can't see your face or they can't hear your voice. But also asynchronously, you can use video recordings, audio recordings, and these can be shared either you with the students or the students with you. And so all of this is an additional level and layer of communication that we don't really think about as much when we're teaching face-to-face. It's not as important when we're teaching face-to-face. But when we're online and the presence is online, we have to think that our presence isn't only us in the camera, but it's also us when we write an email, us when we give written feedback, us when we give instructions for a task, which is away from the live classroom, but it's still us. And it's a great way for us to keep our presence there, so the students feel that we're supporting them, following them, we're there for them. Okay. So just to summarize this, with asynchronous communication, which I would say this is kind of the new area that we're exploring, here are some just very simple ground rules that will help things to work for you and help things to work for your students. I'm sure all of you have been working with problems and obstacles and challenges with this as you went online, but first of all, choosing a clear channel of communication that's easy and accessible for you and your students. Try to choose something that most people are familiar with. That could be email. You might be working in a school where all the students have their own email account. That might be some kind of phone-based messaging, depending on who you're working with. The next one I think is incredibly important for teacher well-being, but also for students. You don't want to be available 24/7. It's not healthy for anyone if the teacher is available 24/7. You need to set clear office hours. You need to let students know when you can be there for them outside of the live lesson, and also set rules for how long it'll take you to answer. You might say, I guarantee that I'll answer your messages within 24 hours during the week, but it might take me 48 hours or more at the weekend. And just make this very clear, and the students will really appreciate this. They will know when they can get in touch with you and when not. And this helps them as well, not to feel that they have to be 24/7. Sending out regular messages with updates, of course, is really important, but maybe if you choose the same day or the same time so that the students know when to look for the messages, then we have fewer of those little gaps between teacher and students and teachers and classes where the information kind of gets lost. And they need to know the tasks, the live sessions, make sure that the messages are getting through. Maybe you want to get them to reply, to confirm. And also there's, if you can, set up some kind of system where you can check in gently every now and then with any students who are not participating, who you can see are struggling, who are having problems. And maybe you can't resolve those problems immediately, but maybe you can at least send a sympathetic message. Okay, so moving on to the idea of voice. And I think really talking about helping the people who are struggling, helping the people with problems. We know this, but I think it's good to remind ourselves that it's even more important than ever to be gentle, to be kind, to be patient, to give our students the benefit of the doubt. So maybe if there's a student who's always missing assignments or late to a lesson, then maybe a private message saying something like, oh, I hope everything's okay. Please let me know if you're having any problems. It's great that you're able to come. Don't worry if you're going to be late. Just let me know. This kind of giving the benefit of the doubt, allowing for an excuse. Extend your deadlines where possible because everybody's under pressure. If you're working with school-age students, English isn't the only subject that they're studying online. They've been forced into a massive change. Everything for them is online. But having said all of that, and we need to be gentle, we need to be kind, we need to be supportive, we can also still be firm if we need to be. Okay. So remembering the digital overwhelm, I think it's time again for everyone to take a stretch. So I can't see if you're doing it or not, but take another stretch and stand up and turn around possibly. I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is my headphones, but this idea that we need to be physical, we need to move, and you need to look after yourselves. Okay, so just a quick reminder again about the course that Robert is going to be tutoring on, Teaching Live Online, and that's it from me in the presentation. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Marvelous, thank you. Not marvelous that you're going to stop showing your screen, but marvelous presentation. Thank you. Wonderful, thank you, Kerry. I think lots and lots of fantastic advice there, and from both of you, really lots of excellent advice and help for teachers. And obviously, you know, I think, you know, as people are trying to sort of find their way through online teaching, there are lots and lots of questions, some of which are kind of possible to answer, some of which aren't. I think, you know, I mean, a lot of what you were saying there around kind of the fact that we're teachers and kind of taking the face-to-face skills that we have and looking at how they can work online is really important. It's not a completely different job. It's still teaching.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's really important to remember that we know what we're doing and that we're all doing something really new, and the students as well. Actually, on the whole, there's a lot of positivity there, and they want to help you. They want to be able to do it. They want life to be as normal as possible, and it's so, yeah, you know, you have a teacher. I remember my daughter at the beginning saying, my teacher's in my bedroom. It's like, no. Why does school have to come home? But now she's loving it, actually. There's kind of the routine of it, the checking in with her teachers who are giving live lessons, and so from the student's point of view as well, from a mother's point of view, it's like an absolute godsend that the teachers are there and giving so much support. So
no,
again,
absolutely.
thank you to everyone.
Can I say something very quickly?
Robert,
yeah.
I totally agree. I think that I feel very proud as a teacher, because I think that right now we are playing a very important social role.
Absolutely.
Our psychology was saying something on TV the other day, saying we're all in isolation right now. And one of the best ways to fight the psychological negative side of that is sticking to routines. And we're being able to offer a little bit of that to our students, to ourselves, to families, because we are kind of like continuing with a normal life, kind of.
Yeah, I think so. I think, yeah, it is that routine, and, you know, and I think, you know, our students are generally fairly forgiving. You know, that it's new for them, it's new for us, and they appreciate that, and they know that. And I think, you know, it's something which actually is almost quite galvanizing and brings teachers a little bit closer together with their students, because we're all trying to sort of find our way through it. You know, lots of things. You know, okay, I'm just looking at the questions. You know, any tips for assessment? Okay, I mean, that they're, you know, I personally don't have the answer to that. I'm sure that some people do. You know, how do we teach productive skills? How do we teach different skills? You know, these are things. I'm not brushing the questions off and dismissing them, but I think, you know, they're questions where there aren't perhaps clear answers yet. Certainly that I have anyway. I'm sure that, you know, I'm sure Kerry and Robert, you probably go, yes, well, obviously assessment, you do it like this, but you know, I think there are lots of things that we're all sort of finding our way through, and that's you know, very unifying, perhaps. So
yeah, I think the working together thing is really important. That the students they kind of suddenly feel this extra empathy for their teachers. You know, sort of like not just the teachers but the students, but it's working both ways. So yeah.
Just going back to that, any tips for assessment? I mean, I don't know if you two have any ideas for that. I know it's a question that we're asked and we're thinking about quite a lot. I have some suggestions. I think, you know, it's a question of looking at how you do the assessment. You know, if you're used to doing a test where they have to sit in silence and there's a right answer and a wrong answer, and you can physically see them in a face-to-face classroom, then obviously trying to replicate that or emulate that in an online context isn't necessarily going to work. So it's often a question of looking perhaps at changing the way that assessment works, so that it's not something where, you know, you're worried about them cheating. It's, you know, what you're assessing is something perhaps different.
I think if we can shift our focus, if possible, because it depends on the system that we're working with,
sure, to
open book testing or open book exams, which I've seen a lot of content teachers have been working towards. So there's this, the information is there, the textbook is there, but you need to apply it to a situation or a problem. Or so, for example, this is something that my kids have been doing with chemistry or physics, or, you know, sort of there's, or even working together with classmates or group mates. That's fine as well, because then what we can do as language teachers as well is we can set up collaborative tasks, but then we can ask our students to write their assessment of the task and to talk about their role in the task. What did they do, or what did each member of the group do? We can set up collaborative tasks so that different students have different roles. Or sometimes we can just either trust them or just say, hey, okay, so that's good practice too. These are the questions, find the answers. If you knew them already, great. If you had to look them up in a grammar book, great, you looked it up in a grammar book. You asked a friend, okay, fine. So it's gonna, but there's a little bit of responsibility being handed over to the students is great as well. It really helps their autonomy. And
and I think that there's a clear distinction between formative assessment and summative assessment. I think that
absolutely.
Right now, unless it's one of those tests like LinguaScale that can be done online and you have certain levels of security, then I think then it is possible. But I think that right now, in the circumstances we find ourselves, I doubt there are very many schools who are actually able to have a system of that level in place to then just, I don't know, I'm speaking about my context. We wouldn't be able to just set up secure exams, summative assessment for the end of term, which is next week. Simply because the current circumstances in general are not, the right circumstances. So in our organization, what we've been trying to do is to focus on formative assessment. Just because you cannot have an end of test high stakes exam at the end of term doesn't mean that you cannot, as Kara was saying, evaluate what your students, assess what your students can do through in every single lesson.
Recordings, I think, as language teachers as well, we have the slight edge that we can, to some extent, obviously students will prepare them, they'll script them. It's very difficult to persuade your students to just do an off-the-cuff recording, although I've done this with advanced adults and they were responsible enough. I set up 2 recording tests. One they were allowed to prepare for, and the second they just had to speak to me freely for 2 minutes and record themselves, and they had to speak about absolutely anything. It was kind of a stream of consciousness. So we're talking about C1 students and responsible adults, but they did it, and actually it was really interesting for me and for them, because I asked them to evaluate their own speaking assignments and tell me what they thought I should give them. And then I evaluated them as well. And then we decided, on the whole, they were really hard on themselves, and I was grading them higher than they were grading themselves. But it was really interesting to see the difference between what they'd prepared and recorded and what they recorded spontaneously. And I think this is something at all levels that we can use and say, this is the student's work, this is the student's voice. You know, even if someone else wrote what they read out, I can still assess the pronunciation, I can assess the intonation, so there are things with language, I think, where we maybe where at an advantage.
I think so. I mean, I'm thinking as well. You know, I've got 2 kids. My daughter yesterday they're kind of working asynchronously, but she had some maths exercises to do that she didn't quite understand. But you know, through Google Hangouts, she got together with a couple of friends in her class, and between them they kind of worked it out and they did it. So there's that. You know, I mean, I think, you know, it's interesting to look at, you know, what we call 21st century skills, of course, with that whole idea of collaboration. You know, actually taking the initiative and thinking, okay, well, look, you know, I maybe know this, they know that. Let's get together and see if we can kind of solve it together. You know, and I think, you know, we tend to neglect those things. Perhaps when we're in a face-to-face classroom, it's always, you know, the teacher, okay, the teacher is the one with the answer. Let's put my hand up and the teacher will give me the answer. Whereas this way, you know, it's actually kind of being creative, being collaborative, and working together to solve problems, which is what, you know, we're always talking about, you know, is the skills that we should be developing in our students.
And then they really are developing them, and it's amazing. They are resourceful, basically.
I think so.
And
I think, you know, I think when it comes to kind of, as you were saying, Robert, you know, the sort of summative assessment at the end of year, you know, that's something for which, you know, that it's very difficult to find a solution for. So you know, maybe it is a question of thinking about, you know, the alternatives to that and seeing how that can happen. You know, and there's no answer to sort of say, yeah, okay, you just give them a test, you do it on this form, you do it online, and you know, this is how you police it, because there isn't I don't think a clear answer for how to do that. So, you know, why not use it as an opportunity to be a bit more formative in the way that we assess our students, you know.
And also, we do know our students, and we can assess them on, you know, a continual assessment basis on participation, and we can give them a global mark as teachers. And again, like my kids' experience at the moment at school, they've been given their end of term marks because basically they did most of the term anyway. They've been doing exams in a couple of the subjects. Obviously, you know, there's no security over answers being shared, and this whole kind of, you know, sort of Google Hangouts group exam experience or whatever. But actually, the fact that they're doing anything at all is wonderful. It's like just the discipline of it and the willingness to try and experiment is fantastic.
I think so. Yeah. Okay, just very quickly, a question. What tool did you use to record the students' voices?
Oh, they did it on their phones. So I was working with adults here, so they sent them to me by WhatsApp. Obviously, there are issues with WhatsApp, and you might not want to share your phone number. Your students might not want to share their phone numbers. Generally, this was a group of university lecturers, so I kind of trusted them with each other's phone numbers. They already knew each other anyway. I would recommend a tool called Vocaroo, which is an online audio recording tool, which is very, very easy to use. It generates a link, so you can share the link in any way, and then you just click on the link and you automatically hear the audio. The quality of the audio is usually very good. I mean, even with the most basic of mics, headphones, whatever, the quality is generally very good. I've used that a lot on online courses. Robert, I bet you have as well. It's a really favorite go-to audio recording tool, but it's fantastic. I would say that was probably the most accessible. Yeah.
Okay. Do either of you have any experience of using WebEx meeting? There's a question about using WebEx meeting for synchronous lessons, because Zoom, the free account, is 40 minutes.
Okay, I have used it in the past, and I don't think it was massively different, but it's been a couple of years, and I can't really remember. Robert, have you had recent experience with it?
No, about 6 months ago. I think it would be unfair if I said, oh, don't use WebEx or I don't like it. What I would say is, in my experience between the two, having been an attendee at a meeting using it, and having been using Zoom, for example, I personally find Zoom more intuitive.
Yeah.
It feels to me personally, I tend to always think, where's the complicated part? So I think that is all you need to know is basically there. And all you
Yeah.
need to do as a teacher is just to sit down 10 minutes, click on all the different buttons to find out what they do, and you're pretty much ready to go.
I think the thing is, if you know WebEx, use it. Fantastic.
Yeah.
If you don't know any of the tools yet, then use what seems to be easiest for you or what's easiest in the context. So some people are using Google Meets, for example. So I mean, there are different tools. Zoom isn't the only go-to, and there have. I know this was in the questions earlier, or I can't remember in the questions or in the chat. Yeah, there have been issues with Zoom recently because Zoom is so popular. And I read an article today that Zoom are on the case, that they're looking for fixes for the problems that they've had with the Zoom bombing. But there are things that you can do to keep your Zoom room safe. So once everybody's in the room, you can lock it. There's all kinds, like there are very basic things that you can do for safety. So you can stop people from sharing screens. You can be the only one who's sharing the screen, for example. You can make sure that everyone's in the waiting room before you open the lesson. No one's in the room without you. You go into the room together. Everyone has to use their real name. So no fooling around with nicknames. And then you lock the room. And then you're fine, really. The danger seems and the problem seem to be when people share the link to their room in some kind of a public channel.
Yeah.
Share the link privately, and if you feel that you need to, especially if you're working with younger learners, lock the room. Once everybody's in, lock the room. And then the problems that people have been experiencing with Zoom, it's possible to guard against them.
I mean, you can also set it up so that they have to register for the lesson. I mean, it's perhaps a little bit more labour intensive, but you can set it so that they register and you have to approve that registration. So you can see who's. Gloria
was asking, how do you lock the room? It's under participants. If you click under participants, then you'll see the lock the room box.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that works in webinar. I think the meeting room, that's how it works.
Yeah. No, none of you are locked in here. Don't worry. You can.
And there are tutorials. You just Google how do you lock the room in Zoom, and there are really easy tutorials.
Yeah, and something that I tend to do for whenever I have a question or someone asks a question, and I go, oh, I haven't thought of that. Go to YouTube.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you obviously don't go for the first video. We have to have that literacy ability skill. So just watch a few, try yourself, and there's your answer in a few minutes.
Also for Zoom, the Zoom itself has a lot of tutorials. So go for the actual Zoom tutorial.
Yeah, definitely.
They're very helpful.
Okay, I'm just aware of time and that some of the questions that are coming through are now about certificates. So I'm going to just share my screen because I'm very organised today and actually prepared a presentation. Not presentation, God, nothing like a presentation. Some links. Some useful links there. So you've got the first one obviously is the Teaching English website. If you go to the homepage, then you can kind of navigate to hopefully most of the things you need there. We also have a page which is set up to provide support and resources for teachers during the COVID-19 crisis. That's a page which is updated regularly. We're getting new things on there every single day. So developing lessons for online classes, webinars, as I say, we're kind of developing those. There are more that we're scheduling, particularly with young learners. We've got a couple of webinars which will be coming up this month for teaching young learners. We haven't got them on the site yet because we've just been setting those up and organising those, but there will be information about those next week. An important one obviously is the certificate. That's the fourth link down. That's the link to the certificate. Equally important, very, very important, is the survey. There's a survey there. It's not a feedback survey for this webinar. It's actually a survey that will help us to help you, really. There's lots of questions in there about the kind of support that you need, specifically for the context that you're working in. And we're developing resources to help you with that. It will also help us with a series of online clinics that we're also currently scheduling, which will be slightly smaller rooms with maximum probably around about 50 in there, and there'll be kind of drop-in kind of clinics where you can come in if you've got specific questions, and we'll have experts in there who will be able to either answer your questions or at least try and find the answers to your questions. So we're currently scheduling those at the moment, so please do look at that second link regularly to see what's happening and what we're doing to help. Webinars, some people are asking about recordings from previous webinars. If you go to, well, either of those pages, actually the second or the third, you can see all of the webinars, all the recordings are there with the presentations and the link to the certificate. So watch the recording, you can download the certificate. We trust you to do that and not just get the certificate in the same way that you can trust your students. They're all important links, so please do go. I'm assuming that you can see them. I'm not just talking randomly and no one can see them. Can you see those?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. Good. Okay. Good. Thanks. Just realised. I thought, hang on a minute. Am I just talking and no one knows what I'm talking about? Anyway, survey. Please do fill in the survey so that we can help you. Tell us what your needs are, and we'll be developing stuff for that certificate. There it is. Webinars, resources, website. Robert, Kerry, thank you ever so much for giving up parts of your evenings. I think you both deserve a drink of whatever you prefer after this, and enjoy the rest of the evening. I say have a nice weekend. Don't go out. All of those things, apart from to walk the dog or to stock up in the supermarket. And thanks everyone for attending, and we hope you're safe and that you stay well. And we look forward to seeing you next Thursday. If you're a teacher educator, if you're a teacher trainer, or you're a manager, we've got a webinar next Thursday, which is all around how you support your teachers and your staff at the moment online. And as I say, there'll be more webinars coming up for teaching young learners. So do come back, and we will see you next time. Robert, Kerry, thanks ever so much. And,
Thank you.
and yeah, fantastic. See you soon, I hope.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, take care.